Hello, welcome to the Gallimorphry, a podcast about the hodgepodge of history. We're coming from you, as usual, from our basement under the carpet shop. My name is Will, and with me, as ever, is my co-host Nick.
Hello, and just to make it clear, we don't live together in this basement. I just want to say that now. We have our own separate places of where we live and sleep.
I think that's an important point, and it needed to be made.
Just in case anyone thinks we're trapped in here.
Just to answer any questions people might have had in the last few episodes. Do we live in a basement under a carpet shop?
As much as I'd love to, thankfully we don't. So, I believe you've queued up an audible atmospheric sound device that will lead us in beautifully to our topic this week.
Yes, so just to give you a bit of a feel for what we're talking about today, here is this episode's audio cue.
It's like I'm in the jungle.
You can feel it, can't you? But yes. So for anybody who still hasn't quite worked it out, what are we talking about, Nick?
Yeah. So this week we're going to be talking about the origin of the modern day zoo, and this was a topic that actually surprised me of how interesting it was. Because when you suggested it, it's something I'd never thought about, and it was something I'd never thought would actually pique my interest as it did. So I have to, take my hat off to you.
I'm glad my co-host has so much faith in my decisions. I could be upstairs.
Okay.
I could be in the carpet shop. But I'm glad that you enjoyed looking into it. It's
there's lots of incredibly bad treatment of animals. It wasn't a picnic.
No,
but it's a fascinating insight, not just into obviously the history of the topic, but the kind of psychological history of humanity.
It's quite contentious, isn't it? There's a lot of opinions on both sides, whether zoos are a good thing, whether they're a bad thing, whether they're cruel, whether they have a purpose, whether they're just meaningless entertainment for stupid people.
Well, not necessarily stupid people. Yes, so we'll be talking about the origin of modern day zoos.
Yeah.
And there's one thing we're going to make an important distinction here. So the concept of what we know as a zoo today, the zoo that you've probably been to as a child, you got taken there, you maybe had an ice cream that you dropped and then cried about, flashbacks of personal torment coming back to me there, where you go and see an ape or a lion or whatever. Mm. And these zoos are very common in cities across Western Europe and, of course, across the States and increasingly across South America, India, and basically around the world is what I'm trying to say. I should have just said that. That is a relatively new concept, but at the same time not.
Yeah, so when we're looking into the past, these things were not called zoos. They were called menageries, which were private collections of animals, normally kept by kings or emperors or pharaohs or what have you. The earliest example we can find of one of these private collections goes back to ancient Egypt. It's another one of those words that we're going to horribly mispronounce. So apologies in advance to any ancient Egyptians who may be listening.
You do realise Egypt is still a country. Ooh. There might be, modern day Egyptians. I mean, it's very unlikely there's any ancient Egyptians listening. If we're being honest,
it's just as well. This is the hodgepodge of history, not the hodgepodge of geography.
Apparently, this is also a time machine in the basement here.
So, the remains of this menagerie were found in the capital of what was then Upper Egypt during the pre-dynastic period. And this is a town which was recorded as being called Hierakonpolis. That is.
I shouldn't laugh. What is it called today?
Today it is called Nekhen.
Nekhen
in modern day Egypt. But we'll make sure we put all these words in the show notes for anybody who has no idea what we're talking about.
I mean, I'm sat here and I don't know what you're talking about. So, all right. What sort of time frame are we looking at?
We're looking at about 2500 BCE. The term CE, Common Era, and BCE, before Common Era, correlate with what would otherwise be known as AD and BC. They're just more neutral ways of saying it.
Religiously neutral, yeah.
Yeah. So Phil, we're an open podcast. We want everyone to be able to listen to us, so we try not to, during the internet, things become more international. Now you're looking at a worldwide audience.
Yes, our worldwide audience.
I'm
sure there's millions of them. Apparently there's ancient Egyptians.
Well, exactly. and all, I think it was the Greeks you offended last time.
Well, there's many people I offended last time. But yes, so was this the oldest example of a menagerie then?
This is the old example that we have found so far. This was a private collection of animals. We're not sure who they belong to. Probably someone quite high up in society. It wouldn't have been cheap to keep these animals. They were relatively exotic, even for Egypt. We can find the remains of the bones of a baboon, cats and dogs. No, they're not very exotic, but there you go.
But that's another interesting thing, isn't it? Because we tend to not think about cats and dogs, but they are essentially captive animals for our entertainment and for our pleasure.
They're
in the same manner that we can go to a zoo and see, a lion or whatever.
They're odd, aren't they? I suppose cats and dogs are different because initially they would have been useful animals, wouldn't they? And now they're because they make people happy. The interesting thing about this topic is there are so many rabbit holes you can go down. Going back to our Egyptian menagerie, we found remains of animals, one of which was an elephant covered in cosmetics. But it kind of...
An elephant covered in cosmetics?
Yeah, cosmetics. So so he had makeup on it. He also had jewellery on. So I think that kind of gives us a glimpse into the purpose of this menagerie. It was there as a novelty for people to spectate the animals. Obviously, if it was there for an educational purpose, which is what modern zoos a lot of modern zoos claim to be part of their purpose, you probably wouldn't put makeup on an elephant. Just speculating here, but
you'd hope not. Though I'd imagine there's probably some labs somewhere which still do that.
Yes.
Yeah, animal testing is a whole other separate issue.
I mean, that could be the twist, couldn't it? That we've just dug up an ancient animal testing lab. But
oh my god, I've never thought of it like that. That's incredible.
Yeah. I'd imagine putting makeup on an elephant.
It wasn't just the Egyptians who had these ancient animal testing labs. So all the sort of well-known crowned heads of the European past, Henry I of England had one. He's said to have started the first royal menagerie at Woodstock. Not the Woodstock you're thinking of, a different Woodstock, a very English, boring Woodstock. And this was around 1110. Henry III moved it to the Tower of London around the 1200s. And he was gifted 3 lions by the Holy Roman Emperor Frederick at the time. And so the menagerie slowly sort of grew from there. And then by the mid-1800s, then it was moved over to what we now know today as the London Zoo in Regent's Park.
So we've got an interesting fact about these 3 lions that were gifted to Henry. The 3 lions, he was very impressed with his 3 lions, and they made their way onto his heraldry on his shield. That imagery has passed down, and eventually it's found itself on the English football team's, what do you call it? Their strip?
You can tell you watch football. It's just a football shirt.
Just football shirt. Well, the 3 lions that we refer to on the English football shirt, that imagery dates all the way back to Henry III.
Can you name any of the English football team?
Can I name them?
Just out of interest.
Bobby Charlton?
We really are in a time machine. We really are. No.
No? Messi. Who does Messi play for?
Oh, let's move on. So what's the most exotic thing you think could have been in this menagerie I'm going to give you the year of 1252.
1252, menagerie in England?
Yes.
Most exotic thing, a panda.
That's actually pretty exotic. It is a bear. It is in the bear family.
It's a bear, okay.
It's a polar bear.
A polar bear. Imagine that. How do you even catch a polar bear in 13th century?
No idea, but it's recorded as existing. And along with the polar bear, in 1255, there was an African elephant. Yeah. So imagine how big that is wandering around the Tower of London. I bet that upset the ravens. And then there was also, linking back to our last show, all about Barbary pirates, there was a Barbary lion, which were native to North Africa.
I see what you did there.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Barbary lion.
And we know it's a Barbary lion because they, as with other scientists, are always digging up bones and then analysing them. These did not have makeup on them. So they obviously weren't as well prepared as the elephant was.
No, not the unfortunate elephant. No. To be fair, I can understand why you probably wouldn't put makeup on a Barbary lion.
You know what? You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. There is a good reason. Yeah. These menageries kind of existed for the next couple of 100 years, right all the way up to the 18th centuries, when you had parks and menageries opening up to the more elite members of society who would become subscribers to, say, certain parks. So, for instance, the Surrey Zoological Gardens were opened in 1831 under Queen Adelaide, who's Queen Victoria's aunt. She was the patron of it, and basically you had to be a subscriber to get in. And if you were a subscriber, you could then give your mates and friends a discount of like $1 to get in. And gradually, as with all things that the rich just sort of get bored of it, and then these things just opened up for the general public to sort of come and see.
So this opening up of the menageries to what was at first the elite members of society to come in and view the animals, this kind of around the time this is happening, we're in what is referred to as the Age of Enlightenment or the Age of Reason. This is a period of time from about the late 17th century that spans into the 18th, when there was a real movement in society towards the emphasis of the sciences and politics and philosophical discourse. And it's this movement which kind of opened up the concept of menageries or zoos being a source of perhaps education.
The Victorian era was really an explosion of different ideas sort of bubbling to the surface. And really you had like a massive shift in society. Industrialization was in full swing. Britain was one of the leaders of the world. It was the leader in the world. And you had a shift away from people like working in more sort of rural communities to sort of city workers. And previously where people would just work and sleep and die while the rich had fun and got richer off the back of them. Oh, how times have changed. You suddenly had people who were doing jobs and then clocking out, and they had a bit of spare cash and time to go and enjoy different leisure pursuits. So you had things like, we're always going to have the pub. The pub is one of the the oldest things in the British psyche for leisure. But gradually you had things like music halls, cinemas, museums, and zoos. But there was also, alongside this, the concept of bettering the lower classes. Back then, the upper classes didn't just think they were superior to anyone who wasn't white. They saw the lower working classes as something of inferior, and they wanted to raise them up and educate them.
See, we're kind of focusing on Britain here, but this movement did affect sort of Europe as well, didn't it?
Actually, the first modern day zoo, which is actually still going, is actually in Vienna, and it was originally the Royal Menagerie. But it was opened up to the public in 1779, and then a little while after that, you have the apologies to any French people, the Jardin des Plantes in Paris, which was botanical gardens, but they also had a zoo which the public can go and visit.
I think that there's a certain amount of disagreement, isn't there, on what was the first true zoo, but the consensus seems to be that the zoo in Vienna predated the zoo in Paris. Is that right?
Yes, the concept of being a zoo that people could go visit for the purposes of education, but also the zoo was there for the purposes of conservation. And of course, one of the most famous zoos in the world, the London Zoo, or the Zoological Society of London, was only established, I say only established, in 1828. So it came a while after, and originally it was only available to members of the Zoological Society for their education, for their study, and a few years later, gradually it got opened up to the public. So just before you had zoos as these sort of educational places, you kind of had what you call travelling menageries, where animals were kept in really bad conditions. They were kept in cramped cages. They were often moved around cities for people just to come and spend a penny and just like gawk at a monkey and maybe even poke it or ride it. Some animals were really badly treated, and some of these menageries even supplied some of the sort of parks and zoos that opened up in the 18th and 19th centuries. It's purportedly began to have started in 1773, but a contemporary account says that he couldn't find evidence of that. But at least by the beginning of the 19th century, it was there. It was said that as you walked by, you could hear the screams of lions and the roars of baboons right in the heart of London. But gradually, these travelling menageries kind of dissipated. And some of the extra exchange animals actually ended up in the Surrey Gardens, which I mentioned earlier. So hopefully they got some better living conditions.
We think of the British being sort of a country of animal lovers. I know that there's that fact that goes around that the RSPCA was formed before the NSPCC. So that was the animal charity was formed before the children's charity, for anyone who's not familiar with those. So it's kind of odd that it would take so long for the rights of animals to be enshrined in law like that.
We're dealing with a period of time where, particularly when zoos were created, a period of time when logic was incredibly twisted. In Germany, there's a gentleman called Karl Hagenbach, and apparently in Germany, Hagenbach is also synonymous with zoo. So if you say I'm going to the Hagenbach, it means I'm going to the zoo. And he was a man that had originally travelling menageries and was actually the creator of the sort of one of the modern day concepts of zoos, which are kind of like reserves. So instead of having animals in gates and parks, you have them in just wild countryside. People are separated not by bars. There's by moats or rivers or just roads if you drive around. And he invented this in 1907, and he earlier had come to the conclusion that you shouldn't be mistreating animals. You shouldn't be poking them with sticks. You should let them roam free. But at the same time, his detractors say he was only doing it to make money. But one of the things that he used to do, and this is where the logic is twisted, is he used to not just have animals. There were such things called human zoos or exhibitions, would have been a better terminology. And he used to have different indigenous peoples that he would just bring over, and he wouldn't properly treat them. A lot of these people would die because you remember when the Spanish and the Portuguese went over to South America and they brought loads of illnesses. So when he picked them up, he wouldn't vaccinate them or anything. They would just die from illnesses, and he didn't really care about that.
It's an unexpected, extremely depressing turn
for
the.
But these things were also common in the UK. So you had a number of exhibitions throughout the 19th century where people were on display. So in Vauxhall Gardens in 1840, a host of Iowa Indians camping in their traditional huts. In 1851, in the Great Exhibition, you could go visit a Chinese family wearing national dress performing national activities. And then in 1895, in Crystal Palace, you had something called Somaliland, or East Africa Exhibition, where sort of 53 people, different families from Somalia, lived in native recreational huts and reenacted battles in which they were then saved by white Europeans.
That is an idea very much of its time there, I think.
It very much is, yeah.
I suppose it's how you look at it. Were they being exploited, or were they actors?
Well, I guess the main problem with the concept is that you are presenting them as a spectacle. You are saying, look at how weird and different this culture is.
Yeah.
You're kind of lowering them to the idea that they're nothing more than just an animal, and that you can observe and study and go, oh, look how all these funny people live.
This is really quite different to, say, dressing someone up as Mickey Mouse and having them parade around Disneyland. This is a wholly different kind of performance.
Yes. It's because it comes from that twisted sense of logic, in that the Victorians were supposedly very compassionate, charitable people, but they had a view that the white Europeans were the dominant race species and that they should be the one deciding the fate of everyone else. This is right during the time when everyone was scrambling for Africa, scrambling for different bits of the world to remake in their own image. And
there was this belief by some members of society, wasn't there, that by, say, taking these countries, by sort of taking India or parts of Africa, the British were doing them a favour. They were kind of civilising them. They were bringing all these things to the country and making them better.
It was this concept that we're going to make your life better whether you want us to or not.
Yeah.
And whether they actually did is a matter of debate.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the state of a lot of countries that were colonised today. They have lots of issues around social, political, economic. We haven't exactly left the world in the greatest condition from our imperial past. So it's we started out with zoos, and we're now going into much deeper stuff.
Yes. So the West Bank, discuss. Okay, probably bring this back to zoos. So how do we go from these kind of early stages of the modern zoo to today, where there is more emphasis on conservation and of perhaps caring for the animals?
Well, it's not really modern anymore. I mean, you had Frederick Neuer who was director of the Vienna Zoo, and he said in 1911, today, no one who wants to be taken seriously will doubt the education and scientific roles of a zoological garden. Today, zoos are still considered places of refuge for endangered species, places of conservation, places of scientific study, and animals are treated particularly well. But at the same time, in the UK at least, it took until 1981 to get an act to ensure that.
Yeah, we are of course focusing mainly on Europe. There are parts of the world where zoos are still not in a great place.
A lot of major cities around the world, no matter where they are, whether they be in the Americas, Europe, Africa, they have sort of conservation shared programs, and they have exchanges of animals. So they have to adhere to certain standards to ensure that the animals are kept kept in good conditions in order to have those exchanges, and they share their knowledge. So modern day zoos do a lot of good work, but there is a lot of heated debate about whether zoos as a concept, are we just kidding ourselves?
Yeah.
Is this really for conservation? Is it really for education, or are we just like the original people centuries ago in that Upper Egypt, going, oh, look at that baboon? It's funny, isn't it?
So I think really we've kind of reached a point where people expect a zoo to be ethical, to serve a certain purpose in society, to look after animals, to care for them, to help with the conservation of species. And while there probably is a certain amount of exploitation going on in the world when it comes to animals, I don't think you're ever going to really, deal with that completely. I think people's expectations have changed, and I think zoos have adapted to fit that. I think it's now got to the point where when you go to a zoo, the first thing you hear about is their conservation efforts, the good they're doing for the world. It's not about, oh, look at this, it's a monkey. Do you want to poke the monkey? The monkey's going to make noises, So I think we have sort of moved on as society. But whether zoos truly are, a force for good, I think that's still something that's going to be very hotly debated by people.
Oh, that was quite the experience, wasn't it? Now we're going to present two of our favourite facts, hopefully a little more lighthearted, that we found while looking into this along the way. So, Will you tell us your zoo fact? Is what I'm trying to say.
So here's my fact. So this is from a story from the BBC. In 2013, Chessington World of Adventures, a theme park in the south of England, which also has a zoo, which I think probably you're quite familiar with, aren't you, Nick?
What's that supposed to mean?
Chessington World of Adventures. They in 2013 they banned visitors from wearing clothes with animal print on them.
Are you saying I've got terrible fashion sense? Saying I'm responsible for this ban?
I'm just saying that the leopard print trousers are a bold move.
I've got the legs for it, mate.
I know we're in the basement, but still.
Well, I'm just trying to fit into the theme of caged animal.
Yeah. The zebra top is working for you, though. You should definitely stick with that. Yeah.
The marmot is. Are they working?
No. Give them time. They'll grow on me. All right.
I don't think they will.
So they banned their visitors from wearing animal print clothing as they felt that it was confusing the animals. They actually hired bouncers on site who would enforce this rule. If you were found on the site with animal print clothing, you would be offered with a grey boiler suit to wear for your visit, or I guess escorted from the park.
A boiler suit. So in essence, you could almost feel like a prisoner for the day.
You could. It would be kind of a reverse thing, You're the prisoner today, not the animals. What have you got?
So mine comes from London Zoo itself. And apparently, we're all familiar with the story of Winnie the Pooh. And apparently, the author, A.A. Milne, was a fan of the zoo and visited the zoo. And he was inspired to write Winnie the Pooh after visiting a resident there who was called Winnie. And she was a female black bear.
Well, was this bear known for its love of honey?
I mean, surely all bears love honey.
Did it live with a piglet?
I can't find information that it did live with a piglet. I think he may have had some creative license there.
He wouldn't have lived with a piglet for very long.
So this bear inspired him. She was there from 1914 until her death in 1934. Well, so thankfully she didn't live to see the rise of fascism to its fruition.
Well, that's something, isn't it?
Yes.
It's comforting to know that the namesake for Winnie the Pooh was not involved in the rise of fascism. So this is the part where we would normally try and dispel some myths about the topic. But the thing about zoos is it is such a divisive topic. There's so many opinions on either side of the argument. There are people who say that all zoos are bad, that no animal should be held captive and all animals should be free. And there are others who say that zoos serve a very valid purpose in society, that sometimes it is right to keep an animal captive. It wouldn't seem right for us to try and kind of take a side on this. There's a really big debate here to have. The best thing to do would be for us to just touch upon the different views on either side of the argument. There's a lot of animal rights groups, and they'll tell you that there's no such thing as a good zoo. That zoos are there simply for the purposes of making money and for sort of human entertainment and nothing else. The zoos themselves will point towards the roles they serve in sort of conservation, in looking after species which are perhaps struggling in the wild, arguably often due to sort of human influence.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that say, oh, well, zoos snatch animals from the wild. They don't. That is a myth. The only time animals are taken from the wild is if they are like wounded and need to be cared for, or as if they're absolutely endangered and they just need to be protected from, say, poachers. Mm. It's never any debate whether a zoo is a good thing or a bad thing. The zoos have come from this place where they weren't a positive thing. They were for the gratification and for monetary benefits of people that had them. We as humans have just got to be nicer to animals, basically.
I mean, the emphasis really needs to be on the well-being of the animal. I don't know. It's such an emotive topic, isn't it?
Yeah, I think the thing to take away from it is that maybe zoos aren't the best thing, but because of how horrible humans are, maybe they're actually a necessary evil.
Yes.
We're all terrible.
Yeah, I think that's the thing to take away from it. Is humans are just the worst. So that was our show. Pretty enlightening, I thought.
You can go to the zoo now.
Next time I go to the zoo, I'm definitely going to go with a very different perspective. What are we going to be talking about next time, Nick?
So next time we're going to be talking about something that's incredibly close to my heart, probably pumping through my heart right now, which is coffee. So how coffee took the world by storm. Its history, its origin.
Oh, okay. I do love coffee.
Yeah.
I think this
do you know where coffee comes from? The very first place where coffee comes from?
Starbucks?
Find out next week if Will's right.
No, I think this is going to be a really interesting topic.
It's not Seattle.
No.
just to clarify that down.
Well, you've blown my mind already.
I've blown it, yeah.
So yeah, until then, we'll hopefully see you soon from our basement under the carpet shop. Please visit our website, www.thegallimorphery.show. Send us an email if you like. We quite like having emails.
Yeah, we love emails, questions, topic suggestions as well.
Yeah, and please, if there's anything you think we've got wrong, please let us know. We're not infallible. Yeah.
And if we have got anything wrong, just that email, just preface it with the subject, "You bastards," or "You lying bastards," and we'll know it's a complaint.
Yes. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you soon.
Take care.
Bye.